Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Spiritual Journey podcast. My name is Nimesh Radia, and I'm your host. I always love starting every episode by saying thank you. I feel so very blessed with this podcast and the number of people it's reaching, the messages we get. My intention was to simplify spirituality and guide people on their journey, to share whatever knowledge we have. And in every episode of the channel, we don't plan an episode, we don't script it, and it's clearly having an impact. So thank you for everyone that's listened, everyone's supported. I feel very blessed with it. I am an Akashic record reader, Akashic trainer, podcast host, podcast creator, as well as spiritual coach and mentor. I feel very guided at the moment with everything that's going on. And what I get to do is get to guide people to truly be their authentic selves, shedding the layers, and truly connecting to who they are. I was guided to start this podcast, and yeah, it's really going well. Globally, it's a top 2% podcast. We've got over 200 episodes. And the podcast wouldn't be where it is today without my beautiful co-host introducing the amazing, the stunning, the healer extraordinaire, and published author, Stacey Brown. Stace, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Hi, everybody. It's good to be back. My name is Stacey. I am an intuitive. I do readings for people from around the world. I'm also an Akashic record reader and a spiritual coach and mentor. And I recently published my first book, Journey to Soul Center, Discovering the Gift of Surrender. And it's available on Amazon and Audible.
Thank you, Stace. So every week, most of the time, we pick a topic based on what we feel energetic. Sometimes we do pick topics in advance, but what we've done a lot recently is just felt the energy and the vibration of what's happening on the planet and then picked a topic accordingly. So this week, we're going to dive into a topic which we feel is being felt by a lot of people. And that is the role of trauma in spiritual awakening. It just feels like a lot of people are going through lots of deep trauma release, karma release, lots of lessons, and it feels like it's all divinely timed based on what's happening on the planet. I talk a lot about, I feel like this time has been planned, this time has been kind of scheduled in terms of the planet going through a massive shift. And when the planet's going through a massive shift, so are we. And that's why I feel like a lot of us are going through some deep learnings, some deep awakenings, darkness as soul. We can talk about all of that. But trauma holds such an important part in our spiritual growth. Sometimes what it does is it forces us to look deep inside to understand and integrate those lessons. And it can take time, right? So maybe we experienced trauma growing up, and for whatever reason, we may have dealt with part of it. We may push some of it down because that's what, from a programming perspective, that's what we tend to do. But working through our trauma, understanding it, integrating the lessons, understanding why we contracted that in this lifetime is a big part of our spiritual growth. At least that's what I believe. And as souls having a human experience, whatever trauma we've experienced in our life or are experiencing now is part of what we contracted to experience in this lifetime. So understanding why we would contract trauma, is it to do with karmic release? Is it to do with some lessons we need to integrate? Is it to do with what we're here to teach on the planet? Could be all of the above. But really kind of sitting with the trauma, understanding it, processing it, understanding what your soul's here to experience, and allowing those trauma, whatever those traumatic experiences are, to be a portal to our awakening, I feel is a really big part of the spiritual journey. And I guess all of us would have experienced some trauma at some point in our life, and how deep that is, what it is very personal to us, right? There's no right or wrong. There's no trauma trumps, right? There's no, it's easy to say, my trauma is more intense than others, and it may be, but it's your trauma. But it's also your journey. It's also your human experience. So everybody's different. But the first stage in this conversation for me is really sitting with your trauma and asking, how is it serving you? So stay someone I know who's been through quite a lot in your lifetime. When I ask you about trauma and kind of its relationship to the spiritual journey, how do you feel about it?
I feel like through my biggest trauma came my biggest awakening. And that was going through everything I went through with Dylan. And I've talked about it on here several times, but that ran so deep. And it was something that took me to my knees. And even here, almost 6 years later, I'm still rebuilding.
Yeah, so let's not assume that people have heard those episodes. So can you just give us a brief overview of when you say Dylan, who's Dylan, and what you experienced?
Yeah, so we're coming up on another anniversary. So we're just at about 6 years. 6 years ago, my son was 17 and he battled mental health and substance abuse issues. And he overdosed in our home and survived. And then he attempted to take his own life by running his car into a tree at 100 miles an hour. And he nearly died. And it just changed everything. I stopped working as a hairdresser. I started having these powerful spiritual encounters. My life became consumed with my son. And I lost myself in the trauma for quite a while. And it was something that I never saw coming. And I had no idea how it would change my life.
And that's kind of what I mean by trauma being part of our spiritual awakening period, spiritual journey, because I've had the benefit of kind of seeing how much you've grown spiritually. I didn't know you when Dylan went through that experience, when you went through that experience with him, but I've known you 4 years now, and I've seen you grow spiritually and become the healer that you are today. And that's the thing. Sometimes it's easier to see when somebody else is going through it. So the first question I'll ask our listeners is, sitting with your trauma and really asking yourself, what did you learn from it? Why would you choose to experience it? Maybe that helps you understand a little bit why your soul picked this experience. Because, I go through my life and my journey, and I was born in Africa, Uganda, and I was only 3 years old when we were refugees in the UK, because Idi Amin basically asked all the Asian Indians to leave Uganda, and basically gave us 2 weeks to leave, and basically said if we wouldn't leave, then we'd be killed. And his assumption was that we had all the money, but also we did a lot of the work. So there's a longer story there, but I was only 3. We basically had to leave the country very quickly. We had a long journey in terms of getting to the airport, etc. And every 30 minutes we were stopped at gunpoint, searched, any valuables taken. I was only 3. So I don't remember any of it, but how much trauma I took on from my family. I've got 4 brothers, 4 sisters, and I got a younger sister. Everyone else is older. So I'm sure that my older siblings must have felt the trauma, must have had a traumatic experience, right? And as a 3-year-old, I probably don't remember much of it, but did I take on that trauma? Maybe. Have I released it? I believe I have released a lot of it. But then even then coming to the UK, none of us knew the language. So we all struggled. And what that meant for me as a 3-year-old is I didn't get a lot of attention. Everybody was trying to figure out their own way. And I didn't have a voice growing up. So part of my trauma and part of everything I've worked with and worked through is what my inner child's been through. And that is not really belonging, being bullied as a child, not having a voice, kind of being promised a lot, a lot of things, but because life got in the way, a lot of time it'd be cancelled. So I went through that trauma as a child, and that a lot of that has defined me as an adult. Saying that I didn't have a voice growing up, but actually really feeling like my voice is my gift now, helps me to understand that growing up not having a voice and then having a voice now was part of my trauma, was part of my healing journey, was part of what I contracted in this lifetime. That's why sitting with your trauma and asking, well, hold on, what have I gained from it? What do I still need to release? Why would I contract it? Because, and we'll move on talking about the ancestral side, because that's a lot of it too. Because really everything we've experienced in this life is for multiple reasons. A lot of it could be due to our spiritual awakening. What are we here to spiritually awaken? What are we here to experience? But also it could be what karma we're here to release, and that could be personal or ancestral. And it could also be our training for what we're here to do on the planet. And for me, for a lot of us, it's all three. Why does it not just need to be one? But understanding it, becoming aware. Awareness is always the first stage in any spiritual journey. And how do you become aware? As you sit with your trauma, you understand how much you've grown, you understand how much you still need to release, and you integrate that as part of your spiritual journey. So Stacey, I'd love for you to share more about, through the trauma that you've been through, anything that's in your heart as you want to share with our listeners that may help them understand their trauma, and kind of any advice you've got in terms of your journey and the trauma that you've experienced.
I feel like I have had some of the most incredible spiritual connections through this time. Like, my book was 100% channeled. There's no other way to explain how that process unfolded, that it was divinely timed. And so there are moments where I feel like that trauma has opened me up to a deeper connection. And it's something that I felt hungry to explore. And so I did. And I just continued to. And the connection deepens and deepens and deepens as we work on it. And as we work on that, it helps the trauma. It helps us heal.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I guess the other thing I should have mentioned is I feel this phase we're in right now, a lot of us are being pushed to deal and handle the trauma. And so if we experience something traumatic and we pushed it down, I feel like a lot of it comes back up in our day-to-day experiences. And I don't really believe in repeat programs. What I believe is that there's a deeper cycle of learning that comes through when we experience. So let's say we always attract the same sort of relationship. Maybe it's not experiencing the same thing. Maybe it's a deeper cycle. And I know I trigger some people when I say this, but if we look at trauma as part of our journey and as here to teach us something, that can be really triggering at times. Because if you experience something deep and traumatic, you then wonder, well, why would I choose this? And that's a tough question to answer. But actually sitting with it, journaling about it, I feel will really help. Then I talked about personal and ancestral trauma.
Those things help, but it doesn't mean that you're not still going to struggle in some way.
That's what I mean by repeat cycles, right? It's that, this healing journey, this spiritual journey isn't a one-time thing, right? It's a lifetime thing. I feel like we're always spiritually growing and always spiritually learning, and it's a lifetime. So anyone that says that they're fully spiritually awakened and they've done all the healing, again, just my opinion, I always kind of smile because I feel like the universe has a way of teaching us that actually our healing is lifetime. So continue to do the inner child work, continue to do the healing is a lifetime thing, right? It's not a one-time thing. But like I said, understanding it, and this is where I was going to next, is our personal, whether it's ancestral, whether it's personal karma, is always another good question to ask, because for a lot of people, the trauma may come from our our blood family, right? And we have an expectation that our blood family is meant to love us, right? Our parents, our siblings are meant to love us, and sometimes it's that programming that kind of keeps us stuck, because not all of us, we picked our blood family to love us, but we did pick our blood family to teach us something.
That's me.
And this is his way, because they know us better than, because we grew up with them as babies, and as we grow up, so they can push our buttons better than anyone else. And I mean, having 8 siblings, I get that, right? But
But
it's
this
that,
can be a hard concept for people.
yeah,
This can
especially
be
with
really
parents.
hard. Yes.
But here's the beauty, right? It's like, for a lot of time, maybe it's not true for everybody, but a lot of the time, if we didn't get the parents that loved us, sometimes the universe gives us other people to give us that, either divine father, divine mother, divine brother, divine sister type energy. It's just we need to recognize it. But knowing and accepting that our parents and our siblings are not always here to love us, because our programming says that we should put everybody else first, that our mom and dad should love us. We see it in the movies, right? We see it in the movies, we see it, and we have the programming, we have the expectations, we see it in others too. It's right, so we see other people with rose-colored glasses, and it's like, oh, other people have got loving parents, why can't I? But one of the biggest lessons is accepting that your blood family is not always here to love you, and you can complete a soul contract. You can decide to integrate the lesson and move on. And it is hard, right? All of this traumatic experience, and sitting with it, and also understanding, is it mine or is it ancestral? Because that's the other thing, is I believe that this generation we're in right now, bear in mind what the planet's going through, has chosen to heal more ancestral karma than ever before. It's part of this the cycle, and it means that clearing the ancestral karma means the next generation is clearer to kind of continue to do what we need to do. So we have taken on a lot in this lifetime. So if you're feeling things heavier and you wonder, why do you feel it so much? Why do you feel this trauma so much? Why have you got so much to release? Why have you got so much? You tell yourself that story. It is because you chose to be here at this time, and it is a choice. And this is difficult, because when I say it's a choice, I mean it was a choice at a soul level. The human may be kicking and screaming and asking, well, why? Why would I pick this? And for many of us, there's been many times we didn't want to be on this planet. If we had a choice, we won't be here. And it's just, it is an interesting time. And, kind of just the more that we can integrate it. And Stacey, I had a family that, and I have a family that loves me, and that, again, did the best they could. Yes, we were in a difficult situation growing up, and everyone's trying to find it, which is why I didn't have a voice. But what's your experience of kind of your blood family? And if I asked you, if you had to integrate a lesson that they're here to teach you, that maybe help our audience, what would that be?
Oh gosh, I feel like I definitely am the furthest thing from winning the lottery when it comes to parents, based off of unconditional love and that kind of thing. Like, that's not a thing um, with either of my parents. And it's been almost 6 years since I've had contact with either one of them. And I send them love and light. I just know that I'm healthier when I'm not around them. And it's taken me some time to make peace with that. But I've had people come into my life that have filled that space in some way and have become like family to me. And I know are there for me and support me and want to see me succeed. And, like the universe is providing that for me. It just looks a lot different than what I thought it would.
And that's the thing, it's our expectations, right? And you say 6 years, and by the way, I'd highly recommend you as listeners read or listen to Stacey's book. It's a powerful journey of the trauma that she went through with her son 6 years ago, which actually also led to her, cutting energetic ties with her family, and it was protecting herself, right? And that is the thing with trauma, is it does push you. And I feel like we're like a volcano. If we push the trauma down, eventually it has to come up. And maybe it comes up as a healing, maybe it comes up as a a traumatic experience, even deeper. Maybe it comes back with some sort of illness or anger. Or this is why I'd recommend that in this listing is really sitting with your trauma. And sometimes it's hard, because what we've done is we pushed it into like a Pandora's box, and if we open it up, we worry that it's going to consume us. But Stacey's example of what she went through 6 years ago, where her son tried to take his own life, and she went through deep spiritual awakening and really understood her trauma, and it's a powerful example of what trauma can do to us in a accelerated fashion. But sometimes that trauma sits dormant, and understanding what it's here to teach you and how you're meant to integrate it is a really important part of this phase. And Stace, can you share a story of, there's lots in your book, but an example of your spiritual journey and kind of what you experienced after Dylan did work? Because what I feel it did for you is opened you up spiritually, and you had some really deep spiritual experiences. So I'd love for you to share an example of what you went through.
Yeah.
And I love what you talk about, right?
Yeah. So, being in that traumatic space was scary and exhausting and depressing and a lot of things. It was also very spiritual. Dylan was running a fever of 106, 107 degrees Fahrenheit, and the doctors and nurses couldn't figure out what was going on, other than to say that it was because he had a traumatic brain injury and his body was struggling to regulate temperature. So he was in a coma in his room. And when I approached the room on this particular day that we're talking about, I heard, "Get the oil." And I walked over to my backpack and opened it up, and I had a card from a friend's neighbor. So somebody who I didn't know directly, who had been to Lebanon and had got a piece of gauze with consecrated oil from a healer from the 1800s called Saint Charbel. And I pulled the oil out of the little packet it was in, and I'm a Reiki practitioner. So I walked over to Dylan's body and I put my hands like on his forehead and on his temples, like with the oil, and then kind of slowly moved down to his chest. And when I got to his chest, I knew immediately like what was wrong. And I ran out into the hallway, and his nurse was out there, and I was like, Nora, I still remember her name. My son has a massive infection in his chest, and he needs an IV antibiotic for 3 days, and it starts with a C. And she was like, what? And I just said, please call the doctor. So my phone rang a couple minutes later, and it was the doctor. And she said, I'm really tired. Like, I just got done a major surgery. I understand you have questions about your son. And I was like, no, I don't have questions. I need you to come and look at him. Like, he has this infection, whatever. So she was like, okay. And she came up, and within 20 minutes or so, the bed was surrounded by the docs and nurses, and they discovered he had one lung filled with fluid and the other lung almost completely filled with fluid. And they ended up giving him an IV antibiotic that started with a C. And I just remember like having no filter. Like I just knew. And it didn't matter if they thought I was crazy. It didn't matter that I didn't have, medical knowledge. I just was going with what I felt. And what I felt ended up like helping to save Dylan. And I don't look at that as me. I look at that as a channel through me. That Reiki prayer, that Reiki healing formed some kind of connection. And we're all capable of this kind of connection, by the way. But in the trauma, it was like somehow it broke me open to a spiritual awareness that I couldn't deny. Like that there was something more than me, more than, doing hair, more than friendships, like more than, I don't know how to explain it, but like, I just became like consumed about the connection with the intuitive part of myself and living in that space versus staying in the trauma. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, right? That's and it's like your story. I've heard it so many times, but it always kind of gives me goosebumps, and because there's so much power in, especially the love of a mother, right? There's that bond, which the whole story you shared is just I'm sure the nurse at the time was thinking, wait, what? Give him an antibiotic that was totally, it's like beginning of C, and this doctor comes in and just like, then they do the test because your insistence. And that's powerful, right? I mean, but that's, the trauma, that's a beautiful example of what I mean by the trauma's here to serve you. It does awaken something in you. It makes you go deeper.
And then you've got to figure out what to do with it.
Yeah. But then without asking, without that awareness, you can't then move on to the step of figuring out what to do with it, right? You need to understand it's there. You need to ask why it's there. And then, okay, when you get the information, doing something about it, there's something happens in you. It takes over the human in you, which is the one that says, don't say anything to the nurses, don't say anything to the doctor because they're going to think you're crazy. That human is almost put to one side because there's a power that takes over you. And that's what working through the trauma and understanding why it's serving. And, kind of, we're breaking through so many kind of cycles, especially, ancestral ones where, maybe you're repeating something your parents did, your grandparents did. Stacey, you haven't talked about it, but, you grew up in the Mormon faith, and the impact that religion has on us, and maybe it's done it for generations, and breaking through that is also a lot of what we're doing right now. We're breaking through these generational cycles and we're pushing through it. And it's just listening to the messages. And Stacey, that's a beautiful example. You got a nudge and you could have ignored it, right? The nudge from your guys, which says use the oil. You could have just said, that's crazy. I'm just not doing it. And you've got lots of examples through that period, right? And, you know, sometimes that spiritual awakening, our spiritual growth does seem like it's accelerated. But actually, it's also because we've done the pre-work. So we're ready for that accelerated growth because we've done the pre-work.
Yeah, but I think the other thing to say is we're not meant to do this alone. And I think that's what a lot of people feel kind of like isolated through the process. And like you pull inward and like that trauma can really make you shut down.
It can, for sure. And it does.
Yeah.
But also, eventually it comes up, right?
Right. And I think
like for example, the sun's exit, right? That was a push.
I just think it's important to say, like, I don't think we're meant to do it alone. I believe that's why so many people connect with this podcast, because there's a space where we're talking about like the deeper parts of the journey.
100%.
You know?
And, you know, and that's why we're trying to use our own experiences. And in Stacey, you always have so much deep, you know, recent knowledge. I mean, we've all been through our trauma, right? And it's just understanding it. But yeah, with this podcast, we try and share whatever's in our heart. We try and be open. We try and channel whatever knowledge, and you're not alone. So if you listen to this episode, you're meant to. We are here. We love what we do. You know, our Akashic records are a great way to understand and really ask about your trauma, understand your soul's journey. You can book a joint reading with us. It's a beautiful experience. We also have a beautiful mentorship program. And I guess to Stacey's point, you know, when you're ready for help and support, the universe will provide it if you ask for it. And sure, if it could come through one of us, it could come through whoever's assigned to you, but you've got to be open to that help. You've got to ask for it. Guides can only help us if we ask for it, and it's just a really, really important point. And, you know, and the other thing that I would recommend is also, a lot of the time, you know, when we're going through something, we'll Google it, you know, dark night of the soul or whatever it may be, but look for that help externally, but also sit with yourself, because a lot of the time, the trauma is trapped inside. It's trapped in our nervous system. And if we're having a physical, so if you've got some sort of physical, something's happening to you physically through your nervous system, that also could be trapped trauma, right? That is also everything in your external. So if you're experiencing something physical, that is a result of something in your internal. And I'm a big believer. That's what I said. It's like when you're experiencing trauma, if you keep pushing it down, it has to come out some way. And it really, releasing is a number of things. One is asking the question, how is it serving you? Two, are you following the nudges? Are you looking at the way the universe is serving you? And that could be in your physical body. It could be in listening to the podcast. It could be in people here to help you. But it's like going on that journey of being a student, asking how this trauma is serving you, becoming aware. And then the next stage is accepting who you are, because, you know, if you're going through something physical, or if you're experiencing something, accepting it is a big part of it. And, you know, I feel like this episode, we could go so many different ways. I feel like it's probably going to be a series, because it is trauma gets stored in the body, and, you know, releasing it sometimes does take help, right? Healers need healing too. And asking for help on how to release it and how it's stored in your body is also, you know, do you need human medical attention? I would always recommend that. But also, do you need healers? Do you need, you know, maybe you need homeopathic remedies? There's so many different things, but always check with your intention, right? If your intention is to be fixed, that's the wrong intention. Your first answer should always be going inwards, journaling about it, understanding the trauma, and then going from there, because there's no bypassing, right? Because a lot of the time what we try and do with the spiritual journey is like, we need to be positive. We need to be positive. Yeah, sometimes we need to try and be positive, of course, but we can't bypass. It's just, a lot of the time I'll be talking to people and they'll be like, well, will the reading give me my own answers? Booking an Akashic reading gives you insights into your soul journey, but it's not going to stop you experiencing the human journey. So if you're meant to experience something painful as part of your expansion, then you're going to experience it. Doing the shadow work is really important. Going deep and feeling the trauma, being honest about how you feel. If you just try and be positive all the time, then you're not really. Then you're kidding yourself. That's your human. That's your human trying to bypass the spiritual part of it, right? But eventually, it's going to come up. So the work that we're asking you to do in sitting with yourself and really understanding your trauma is asking you to do the work. The work that we do, we can help you and guide you. I mean, the 3-month mentorship program me and Stacey do, it should come with a health warning because we take you deep on your shadow work. We take you deep on the trauma and help you to guide you to release it. But it means you have to go through some deep and dark places. We hold your space while you're doing it. And any mentor and any coach you look for should do the same, right? Anyone that resonates with your heart and soul level. And none of us need fixing.
No, we guide you to your answers. We guide you to your answers on your own personal journey. But sometimes you have to do it with support. I know I did. I know I could not have done it without the mentors that I had in my life. And they gave me the tools that I needed to be able to ground myself through the trauma.
Sit with that for a second. And that's the thing is, when the student's ready, the teacher shows up. So I really believe the universe wants to support us. So once we start this internal work and understanding our trauma, that's when you open yourself up to deeper healing. You can't bypass it. Your soul having a human experience, you've got to have the human experience. And yes, it doesn't always need to be painful. It doesn't always need to be deep. Sometimes it's positive. But it's all of it, right? Who decides what's good or bad? It's an experience, and you can't bypass it, right? And then, like I said, there's so many different ways we can take this, and because then you start thinking about inner child, and loving yourself. There's that. I talked about my childhood, right? I'm sure all of us in some way has been through something in our childhood which is impacting our adulthood, and understanding your childhood experience, but also your inner child. Your inner child's not just what you've been through in this lifetime. Sometimes you carry trauma from a past life, and that also carries through in your inner child. So your inner child is really that part, that child inside of you that is sometimes emotional, sometimes, kind of plays out. It's that, and understanding your inner child is also such a big part of it, right? And just, there's so much to this. But basically, the premise and the way you've always got to start is the trauma is here to teach you something. Because it can be a transformational experience. Because, and doing the inner child work, doing and understanding trauma, and every week I feel like whatever topic we're talking about, self-love, self-care is such a big part of it. What is your self-care routine? What does that look like? Everyone says you should love yourself. Yes, you should. But don't give it words. Because that's easy. That's the positivity we were talking about. Self-care is doing something for you every day, journaling, meditation, time in nature. And then self-love is truly falling in love with yourself. And the work that we do, we include mirror work. And part of that is falling in love with you. Because what happens is, as we were talking about awareness, right? Asking yourself these questions, you become aware, and then you oh my God, I can't believe I've been doing this for 5 years. Well, I wish I knew this 5 years ago. Don't go there. Accept who you are. So fall in love with this version of you. be proud of him or her. So working on self-love, true self-love, no bypassing, releasing the fear and resistance you've been holding on to, because these traumatic experiences, if you haven't released them, are going to come up in different forms. They are going to come up in your relationships in your day-to-day. So understanding that your relationships, so it's like, the way I describe this often is like you're your own superhero, you're your own Disney character. Everyone in your world is playing the roles that you ask them to play. So if you're being triggered by people in your world right now, they're serving you some kind of way, and maybe they're serving you to help you to understand the trauma that you need to release. Understanding your soul contracts and really asking yourself that question, how are these people serving me? And these words are easy, right? I mean, Stacey both talk about, everything you need is inside you, all your answers, but it's just, sometimes you run away from those answers, right? And the universe has a way of bringing a mirror up for you. So I guess the other question I was asking is, what's your recent triggers? What has triggered you recently that may be a lesson for you that could be relating to some trauma you experienced? I mean, Stacey, any advice you've got for our listeners in terms of understanding the trauma and releasing it?
I think those memories are always going to exist. Those parts of you that are painful are always going to exist. But I believe that it's what we do day to day that really has an impact on how we process the pain. And for me, being physically active, I know that I'm healthier and better when I'm moving my body at some point in the day. And writing has been such an outlet, sometimes more challenging than others, so it ebbs and flows. And helping other people.
That's so
filling my
powerful.
cup.
Sorry, Stacey, what are you saying?
Filling my cup.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah, I mean, filling your cup, putting you at the center of your world, being kind to you, and knowing that the people that are triggering you are doing you a favor. And that's really weird, right? That's such a strange concept. Hold on. If somebody's triggering me, they're doing me a favor. What does that really mean? It means if you're triggered, there is something you're holding on to inside. There is something you're ready to release. And I believe triggers only come up when we're ready to heal them. So what if you do take that concept and taking it further? What if you become a student? When whatever has happened to you in your world, become inquisitive, change your question. How is it serving me? What can I learn from this experience? I mean, like I said, for me, this feels like it's going to be a number of episodes in terms of, we haven't dived deep into Dark Night of the Soul. I mean, it's like sometimes what happens to us, like you say, in terms of what Dylan went through, there's something majorly traumatic. It's almost like you're on this path and then something major happens that takes you on a different path. And I've talked about my experience of, I experienced some dark magic, which led me to spiritually awaken. And I mean, that's a longer story, but I know that was a soul contract, right? And understanding your soul contracts, I knew that I'd contracted a friend at the time to do some dark magic on me. I had no clue at the time. But actually, when I got through it, it did lead to a spiritual acceleration. I feel that spiritual awakening is a lifetime thing, but it did. I wouldn't be the healer I am. I wouldn't be on this podcast if I hadn't experienced it. This is what I mean by go back to your deepest, darkest trauma. What do you, any experience, and really ask yourself, how much did I grow? How much did that change my life? How much did that change the trajectory of my life? And sometimes we have regrets. Oh, I wonder what my life would be like if. You can't, unless you got a time machine. I know I haven't. And if you have, let me know, because, I'd love to borrow it. But sometimes, and just knowing that whatever's happened to us is serving us. And I get that can be triggering. And when you go into your inner child and, you're trapped memories, and then it's like once you start releasing, it is transformational, but a lot of time your physical body is always the last to catch up. And Stacey, I mean, you're a great example, rebuilding after trauma. It takes time, right? I mean, you're still, we talk about it all the time. I mean, what happened to you 6 years ago, you have become the healer that you are today. You've changed what you do on a day-to-day basis. But I'm sure if I've asked you, have you released all the trauma from 6 years ago, what would you say?
Probably not yet.
And maybe you never will, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Your relationship with all your kids and everything was impacted, right? It changed the trajectory of, you wouldn't be in the UK right now, being with the partner that you love, if you hadn't been through that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, you can't just pick the good parts of your life and ignore the darker parts. You pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other. So really understanding your journey is such a big part of healing from trauma. Realizing that what you went through is part of your human experience, and it is serving you in some kind of way. And right now, the planet is going through such a shift. So many people are being awakened. So many gifts are being. What I mean by gifts is we are the gift. Your light, your emotion, your vibration, your ability to connect to other souls, your empathic ability. All of those are your gifts, and that's probably another episode. But but ultimately trusting your journey, knowing that everything you've been through is part of your soul's evolution and your soul picked it, for me is stage one. Accepting, but even part of that, like I said, awareness, asking yourself, how is this trauma serving you? So once you accept that, the trauma that you've been on is part of your human experience, then understanding the trauma, becoming aware of how it's serving you, how it's expanding you, and then accepting this version of you, are all big steps. And we'll go deeper on some of these topics in the coming episodes. But this is what we're experiencing right now. This is, I guess you could call it, it's a mass awakening, but I really feel like we've been pushed to work through our trauma, work through the ancestral and the personal karma that we need to release as part of this transformation. A lot of spiritual leaders will talk now about ascension or shifting from third dimension to fifth dimension. I talk a lot about shifting from divine masculine to divine feminine. There's definitely a spiritual shift happening, which is why I feel like through lockdown, we had time to heal. 2024, there's so much karmic cycles that close. Maybe lots of people lost their friendships, and so much change. It is, for me, is part of this journey, this awakening the planet's going through. So if you're feeling trauma, if you're feeling really heavy, start to work through your trauma and accept that it's part of your journey. Stacey, what I'm going to ask you as we get closer to the end of this episode, any final bits of advice you have and any journal prompts you have for our listeners?
Well, so right now we're in the phase of just talking about the trauma itself. So I know it's going to take some courage, but if you're going to follow these episodes in a series, I would say start with writing down some of your trauma. Don't relive all of it, but make a brief list of the things that you've experienced and allow yourself to sit with what you went through in that experience. And then we'll get into the next episodes where we'll talk about the different layers that happen after the trauma or can happen after the trauma. How does that sound?
That sounds great. I would also add, just consider with all those traumatic experiences, what did you learn? We'll go deeper into it, but I feel at this stage, just asking yourself, what did I learn from them? I feel may open you up to a different level of understanding. And then from there, in the next few weeks, we can go dive deeper into the inner child work, dark night of the soul, and just this journey feels, like I said, right now it feels like we've been pushed to shift in a different sort of way, and it feels really appropriate. Trusting in your journey, and to Stacey's point earlier, knowing that you're not alone, that you can ask for help, and it's powerful to ask for help, and knowing that your journey has meaning. You're here to do something. You're here for a reason. You're needed. You're wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big part of it, right?
Yeah, it's a
And
big
as
part
Stacey
of
said,
it.
if you want help, reach out. Right, the mentorship program we have, reading Akashic records, even just DMing us and let us know what you're going through. Maybe give us some suggestions on what you want us to talk about in the coming episodes. We love what we get to do. We love what we share in this podcast. I'm sending everyone so much love and light. If you're going through something, I truly hope these words held your space. Hopefully you felt the love coming from our energy and our vibration, because we're sending you so much love and light. Stacey, I'm going to hand over to you to close us out.
So I just want to mention before we jump off that on Sunday, May the 4th, I am holding an in-person retreat. And the day before will be a meet and greet. So if you want to join us, contact me. It will be in the States. And I'm super excited about it. It is, I have a code. I have a code for 10% off. So reach out and I'll share that with you if you're interested in joining. And you know what? If we got enough people interested, maybe I could convince Nimesh to come and be with us too.
Sure. Stacey, you want to give us at least an idea? You said it's in the US, but kind of an idea of the location, at least the state.
It's in Maryland.
So if you're in the Maryland area, reach out to Stace. It's early May the 4th. If you're available, I would highly recommend it. Being with communities, supportive communities, meeting people in person is also a big part of it, right? Maybe there's somebody you're supposed to connect with on that day that maybe can guide you on your journey. Who knows? I'm sending you everyone so much love and light, and reach out to us. We love what we get to do. Stace, I'm sending you so much love and light. Thank you for sharing the space with me, and we'll be back soon. Bye, everybody.